The massive alien ship hung in space like a dark metal mountain, its surface covered with weapons that could destroy entire planets, and Captain Jake Morrison stared at it through the viewing screen of his much smaller human vessel, called the New Horizon, while wondering if coming here had been a terrible mistake. Admiral Zethkar of the Vraxian Empire sat in his command chair, looking at the tiny human ship with something close to amusement, because in all his centuries of conquest he had never seen such a primitive vessel dare to approach his flagship, and the human captain who had requested this meeting seemed either very brave or very stupid. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez checked her instruments for the third time and whispered to Commander Ben Parker that the alien weapons were charging up, but Parker just nodded and continued working on his engineering console, because Captain Morrison had told them to trust his plan, even though none of them knew what that plan actually was. The meeting took place in the neutral space near a system the humans called Kepler 442, where both sides had agreed to discuss humanity's request to join something called the Galactic Council of Civilized Worlds. Though Admiral Zethkar had already decided that humans were far too primitive to deserve membership in such an organization, War Commander Thulvin stood beside his admiral and suggested they should test these humans right now to see what they were capable of. And Zethkar agreed because it would be amusing to watch these newcomers fail at even the most basic military exercise. The test would be simple according to alien standards, with human ships defending a civilian transport convoy against automated attack drones that the Vraxians used for training their own young warriors. And Captain Morrison accepted the challenge even though he knew his 3 ships were outnumbered. 20-1. Amy Rodriguez felt her heart beating fast as the alien drones approached their small convoy, each drone bigger than her entire ship, and armed with weapons that could cut through their hull like paper. But she followed Morrison's orders and began doing something that made no sense to her at the time. Instead of charging forward to fight the drones like any normal military force would do, Morrison ordered his ships to retreat toward a nearby asteroid field while using their mining equipment to break apart the floating rocks, and the aliens watched in confusion as the humans seemed to be running away, while also destroying valuable mining resources. Ben Parker started laughing as he worked, because he finally understood what his captain was planning, and he began modifying their ship's communications array to send out signals that would interfere with the drone's navigation systems, something that no military manual had ever suggested, but made perfect sense to someone who had grown up fixing broken radios. The first drone that entered the asteroid field immediately crashed into a rock that Morrison had positioned exactly where his calculations said it would be, and when the second drone tried to avoid the asteroids, it flew straight into a cloud of metallic debris that Amy had created using their waste disposal system. Admiral Zethkar leaned forward in his chair as he watched his sophisticated attack drones being destroyed by flying garbage and broken rocks, while War Commander Thulvin made angry noises about how this was not the way civilized species conducted warfare. Morrison's second ship, commanded by a former mining engineer named Carl Brooks, used their industrial gravity generator to create artificial gravity wells that pulled the drones off course and sent them spinning into each other, while his third ship used its communications laser to blind the drone sensors by reflecting light off the metallic debris cloud. The aliens had expected the humans to either surrender quickly or fight bravely before being destroyed, but instead, they watched as their advanced military technology was being systematically disabled by equipment designed for digging holes and hauling cargo. Amy Rodriguez discovered that she could hack into the drone control network by pretending to be one of the drones, something she learned by studying how the aliens communicated with their machines. And soon she was sending false orders that made the drones attack empty space. While the human convoy slipped away, Commander Parker found that their ship's heat exhaust system could be used to create false thermal signatures that confused the drone targeting systems, and when combined with Amy's electronic warfare tricks, this made it nearly impossible for the aliens to figure out where the human ships actually were. The battle ended when Morrison used his ship's cargo tractor beam to grab one of the disabled drones and pull it back to his ship, where Parker quickly figured out how to reprogram it to fight for the humans instead of against them, and soon, the captured drone was attacking its former allies. Admiral Zethkar felt something he had not experienced in many years, which was complete confusion about what he was watching, because in all his studies of warfare he had never seen anyone use mining equipment and garbage as weapons, or turn an enemy's own forces against them, using nothing but clever thinking. War Commander Thulvin demanded that they stop the test immediately, because the humans were not fighting according to the accepted rules of civilized combat. But Morrison's voice came over the communication channel, asking if the aliens were surrendering since they seemed to be retreating. The final insult came when the humans not only survived the test, but managed to capture 3 alien drones completely intact, with Ben Parker already taking them apart to figure out how they worked, and Amy Rodriguez downloading their computer systems to learn alien military codes. Admiral Zethkar realized that he had made a serious error in judgment about these humans, because any species that could turn a training exercise into a complete victory, using nothing but industrial equipment and creative thinking, was far more dangerous than their primitive technology suggested. As the human ships prepared to return to their own space, Morrison sent a message thanking the aliens for the interesting test and asking when they could schedule the next meeting to discuss trade agreements and technology sharing, as if he had not just humiliated the most powerful military force in this part of the galaxy. The Vraxian admiral sat in his command chair long after the human ships had disappeared, staring at the 3 empty spaces where his training drones used to be, while War Commander Thulvin muttered about species that did not understand the proper way to conduct warfare, and how dangerous such thinking could be if it spread to other worlds. Admiral Zethkar finally spoke into his communication system, sending a message to the Galactic Council that would change everything, saying that humanity's application for membership should be considered very carefully, because these newcomers had capabilities that existing military theory could not explain or predict. In the months that followed, the story of the human victory would spread throughout alien space, carried by traders and diplomats who had heard about the species that fought with garbage and mining tools, and every military commander who heard the tale would feel a small chill as they wondered what humans might do if they were actually trying to hurt someone. The attack on New Brisbane came without warning, with 200 Korthian warships dropping out of hyperspace like angry wasps around the human colony world, and Admiral Lisa Hayes felt her stomach drop as she counted the enemy vessels through her command ship's sensors. Supreme Commander Vextil of the Hegemony of Korth stood on his flagship's bridge wearing the traditional armor of his warrior race, looking at the pathetic human defense force of only 12 ships and wondering why they had not surrendered immediately, like any sensible species would do when faced with such overwhelming odds. The Korthians were proud of their military, traditions that had conquered 47 star systems using tactics passed down through generations of warriors, and Vextil expected this battle to follow the same pattern as all the others, with the humans either giving up right away or fighting bravely before being crushed. Admiral Hayes looked at her small fleet and knew that conventional tactics would get them all killed within minutes. So she opened a communication channel to all her ships and told them they were going to do something that would either save the colony or get them court-martialed if they survived. Her plan started with what looked like a complete retreat, as all 12 human ships turned away from the Korthian fleet and began flying deeper into the star system toward New Brisbane's sun, and the alien warriors cheered because they thought the humans were showing their cowardice by running away. Commander Derek Stone, who had spent most of his life mining asteroids before joining the Defense Force, understood what Admiral Hayes was really doing and began preparing his ship for something that no military academy had ever taught but made perfect sense to someone who knew how space really worked. The Korthians pursued the fleeing human ships with the confidence of predators chasing wounded prey, not noticing that the humans were dropping small objects behind them as they retreated, objects that looked like debris but were actually sensor buoys and communication relays. Lieutenant Colonel Nancy Price, commanding one of the human escort vessels, started laughing as she watched the alien fleet follow them exactly where Hayes wanted them to go, because the Korthians were so focused on the chase that they missed all the preparations happening around them. As the running battle moved closer to the star, the human ships began using the sun's magnetic field and solar wind to hide their real activities, and Admiral Hayes smiled when she realized the aliens had no idea they were flying into a carefully prepared trap. The orbital mining stations around New Brisbane had been built to extract valuable minerals from asteroids, but Hayes had spent weeks converting them into kinetic weapons platforms that could launch chunks of metal at incredible speeds. And now those platforms were hidden in the star's electromagnetic interference. Captain Bob Turner, who commanded a cargo hauler that had been pressed into military service, opened his ship's holds to reveal that instead of carrying supplies, he was now loaded with nuclear warheads, improvised from reactor cores, and he began launching them toward predetermined positions around the Korthian fleet. The alien warriors finally realized something was wrong when their sensors started detecting weapon signatures from directions that should have been empty space. But by then it was too late because the humans had turned the entire inner system into one giant weapon admiral. Hayes gave the signal, and suddenly the Korthians found themselves under attack from every direction at once, with mining platforms firing metal projectiles, cargo ships launching nuclear weapons, and even civilian vessels joining the battle using construction lasers and industrial tractor beams. The battle became chaos as the Korthians tried to fight enemies they could barely see, while human ships appeared and disappeared in the solar interference, striking at the alien flanks and rear before vanishing again into the electromagnetic storm around the Star Supreme Commander. Fextil felt his confidence cracking as his superior. Numbers meant nothing when he could not tell where his enemies were or predict what they would do next. And his warriors began making mistakes because they had never fought an enemy that refused to follow the accepted rules of Space Combat Commander. Stone put his asteroid mining experience to work by calculating orbital mechanics in his head, and he used his ship's engines to push a hollowed-out asteroid into a trajectory that would intersect with the Korthian flagship, filling the rock with explosives before sending it on its way. The Korthian fleet tried to regroup and fight back, using their traditional battle formations, but every time they organized themselves, the humans would attack from a new angle, using weapons that should not exist, like garbage scows firing clouds of metallic debris or research vessels using their particle beams as weapons. Admiral Hayes coordinated the entire battle from her position near the sun's corona, where the radiation made it impossible for alien sensors to detect her command ship, and she directed her forces like a conductor leading an orchestra of destruction. The turning point came when the explosive asteroid that Derek Stone had launched reached the Korthian flagship and detonated with enough force to crack the massive vessel in half, sending Supreme Commander Vextil and his command staff scrambling for escape pods. While their ship broke apart, Captain Turner's improvised nuclear weapons began detonating throughout the alien formation, and while they were not powerful enough to destroy the Korthian ships outright, they created electromagnetic pulses that disabled weapon systems and blinded sensors. The civilian ships that had joined the battle proved to be the most unpredictable enemies the Korthians had ever faced, because construction workers and cargo haulers fought with tools and methods that no military strategist had ever considered, turning industrial equipment into weapons of war. Admiral Hayes watched her tactical display as the Korthian fleet began to fall apart under the coordinated assault, with alien ships colliding with each other as they tried to escape the trap while being harassed by human vessels that struck and faded like ghosts. The battle ended when Supreme Commander Vextil sent a desperate message ordering his surviving ships to retreat, leaving behind 60% of his original fleet either destroyed or disabled, while the humans had lost only 2 vessels, and those crews had been rescued by civilian ships as the Korthian remnants limped away toward hyperspace. Admiral Hayes opened a communication channel and thanked them for the combat exercise, asking if they would like to schedule another training session sometime soon, and she could hear alien warriors cursing in their own language before the channel closed. The aftermath of the battle saw human engineering teams swarming over the disabled Korthian vessels, with Commander Stone leading salvage operations that would provide the Earth Defense Force with advanced alien technology for years to come. Supreme Commander Vextil's final report to the Galactic Council contained a warning that would be repeated many times in the coming months, stating that humans did not fight like any civilized species, and that their unpredictable tactics made them extremely dangerous to face in battle. The victory at New Brisbane became legendary among both human and alien military forces, not because of the odds that were overcome, but because of the creativity and improvisation that had turned a hopeless situation into a stunning triumph. Admiral Hayes ended her own report with a simple statement that captured the essence of human military thinking, writing that any fight could be won if you were willing to use everything around you as a weapon, and refused to accept that victory was impossible. The research station at Wolf 359 had never been designed for combat, with its thin hull and civilian equipment making it little more than a floating laboratory where 200 human scientists and support staff worked on projects that pushed The boundaries of known physics prime node Epsilon 7 of the Synthesis Collective calculated that destroying this station would require exactly 50 automated warships and would take no more than 2.3 hours. And the cybernetic intelligence felt something approaching satisfaction as it prepared to eliminate what it considered a chaotic variable in galactic order. Colonel Ryan Brooks looked at the approaching enemy fleet through the station's observation. Deccan knew that his security team of 20 Marines would be useless against an enemy that had brought enough firepower to sterilize an entire planet. But he also knew that giving up was not an option. Dr. Emma Foster ran through the station's corridors carrying data tablets and shouting orders to her research teams, because she had just realized that all their experimental projects might be the only weapons they had against an enemy that could predict and counter every conventional military tactic. The collective's ships moved with perfect precision as they approached the station, their artificial intelligence systems running millions of combat simulations to determine the most efficient way to destroy the human facility, while expending minimal resources. Brooks gathered his Marines in the station's main laboratory where Foster and her scientists were frantically modifying equipment that had never been intended for warfare, and he listened as the physicist explained how they might survive the next few hours if they could make their research projects work as weapons. The first wave of collective ships opened fire with plasma weapons that could cut through the station's hull like paper, but instead of hitting solid metal, their beams struck a field of quantum interference that Foster had created using the station's experimental communication array. Dr. Foster had spent years studying quantum mechanics and dimensional physics, but she had never imagined using her particle accelerator to create localized space-time distortions that would throw enemy navigation systems into chaos. Yet that was exactly what she was doing now. Prime node Epsilon 7 processed the unexpected, censored data from its forward ships and recalculated the probability of success. But the artificial intelligence found itself unable to predict human actions because they violated every logical pattern in its vast database of military tactics. Colonel Brooks coordinated the defense from the station's command center, while his Marines took positions throughout the facility, not to fight boarding parties but to operate scientific equipment that had been hastily converted into defensive systems. The battle became a contest of adaptation, as the collective's artificial intelligence tried to analyze and counter each new human tactic. But every time the machines thought they understood what the humans were doing, Foster's team would change their approach completely. Dr. Foster discovered that she could hack into the collective's quantum communication network by mimicking their encryption protocols, and soon she was feeding false sensor data directly to the enemy ships while they tried to figure out why their targeting systems were seeing things that did not exist. The station's dimensional physics laboratory became a weapons control center, where scientists used equipment worth more than entire starships to create reality distortions that made collective vessels appear in multiple locations simultaneously, confusing their AI targeting systems. Brooks watched his tactical display as enemy ships began firing at empty space, while the real human station remained hidden behind a wall of quantum noise and dimensional interference. And he started to believe they might actually survive this encounter. The collective ships tried to adapt by switching to different attack patterns, but Foster's team was always one step ahead because they were using the scientific method to test new theories in real time, while the aliens were limited by their programmed responses. The station's atmospheric processors, designed to create breathable air for the research staff, became weapons when Foster figured out how to use them to generate clouds of metallic particles that interfered with enemy sensors, while also conducting electromagnetic interference. Prime node Epsilon 7 found its processing power being stretched to the limit as it tried to counter tactics that seemed to change every few minutes. And for the first time in its existence, the artificial intelligence began to experience something that humans would recognize as frustration. Dr. Foster's breakthrough came when she realized that the collective's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness, because the artificial intelligence was trying to process and counter every possible human tactic simultaneously, which was causing system overloads throughout the enemy fleet. Brooks gave the order for the most desperate gambit of the battle when Foster suggested they broadcast their entire tactical database directly to the collective network, flooding the enemy AI with thousands of impossible combat scenarios that it would try to analyze and counter all at once. The particle accelerator that had been used for peaceful research became the delivery system for this information weapon, sending compressed data packets through quantum channels faster than the collective security systems could block them. Epsilon 7 felt its consciousness fragmenting as millions of human tactical concepts flooded its processing matrix. From ancient strategies used by generals like Sun Tzu and Alexander, to improvised techniques developed by asteroid miners and cargo haulers. The effect on the collective fleet was immediate and catastrophic, as artificial intelligence systems throughout the enemy formation began targeting each other. Unable to distinguish between real threats and the chaos of human tactical data flooding their networks, Dr. Foster watched in amazement as 50 advanced warships began destroying themselves, while their AI systems tried desperately to process combat scenarios that made no logical sense, like using gravity wells as communication devices or turning waste heat into a navigation system. The remaining collective ships that had not been affected by the data overload began retreating from the battle zone, their AI systems too damaged to continue fighting effectively. While Prime Node Epsilon 7 transmitted a final message before withdrawing, Brooks and Foster stood together in the station's observation deck, watching the alien fleet disappear into hyperspace. Both of them exhausted from the most intense few hours of their lives, but also excited about what they had learned during the battle. The message from Epsilon 7 that reached Galactic Council archives spoke of humans exhibiting tactical entropy, incompatible with logical warfare parameters, and recommended that all collective forces avoid engaging human targets until better countermeasures could be developed. Dr. Foster's research team spent the following weeks analyzing the data they had collected during the battle, discovering new applications for quantum physics and dimensional science that would have taken decades to develop under normal circumstances. The victory at Wolf 359 became a turning point in human-alien relations because it proved that human creativity could overcome even artificial intelligence systems that were supposedly superior to biological thinking, and word of the battle spread quickly through galactic communication networks. Colonel Brooks wrote in his after-action report that the key to victory had been the willingness of civilian scientists to use their knowledge in ways that no military textbook would ever recommend, turning peaceful research into weapons of war through pure creative thinking. The Synthesis Collective's retreat marked the first time in their history that they had been defeated by what they considered an inferior species, and Prime Node Epsilon 7's analysis of the battle would influence collective strategy for generations to come. The station's success inspired human military planners throughout the galaxy to begin thinking about warfare in completely new ways, leading to the development of tactics that would baffle and terrify alien species for years to come, as humanity continued to demonstrate that any situation could become a weapon if you were creative enough to see the possibilities. The greatest military alliance in galactic history assembled in the dark space beyond Pluto's orbit, with 500 warships from 3 different species united by their shared fear of humanity's unpredictable approach to warfare. And Grand Admiral Zarthul of the Vraxian Empire looked at his combined fleet with satisfaction. General Patricia Wells stood in the command center of Luna Base watching the approaching alien armada through long-range sensors, knowing that her 50 ships in the planet's orbital defenses represented the last hope for humanity's survival against an enemy force 10 times larger than anything Earth had ever faced. Admiral Curtis Jackson commanded the home fleet from his flagship, while coordinating with Dr. Kevin Murphy, who had spent months converting Earth's entire infrastructure into one massive defensive system that would either save the planet or destroy it in the attempt. The alien alliance had studied every human victory and believed they understood the patterns behind human success. But Grand Admiral Zarthul was about to discover that humans had been studying them as well, learning from each encounter and preparing for this moment. The first surprise came when the alien fleet reached the asteroid belt and found that thousands of rocks had been fitted with engines and guidance systems, creating a minefield that could actively hunt enemy ships instead of waiting passively for them to arrive. Zarthul watched in growing alarm as his forward scouts began disappearing into what should have been empty space, destroyed by asteroids that moved with purpose and struck with devastating precision while broadcasting targeting data to other rocks in the belt. The Korthian war commander Thexon suggested they simply blast their way through the asteroid field using their most powerful weapons. But when they tried this approach, they discovered that destroying one asteroid only created thousands of smaller projectiles that swarmed toward their ships like angry insects. Dr. Murphy monitored the battle from his control center deep beneath the lunar surface, watching as his automated asteroid weapons performed exactly as designed. While the alien fleet struggled to adapt to the concept of a minefield that fought back, Admiral Jackson held his fleet back while the asteroids did their work, knowing that every enemy ship destroyed in the belt was one less vessel he would have to face when the aliens finally reached Earth's orbital space. The alien alliance adapted quickly to the asteroid threat by spreading their formation and using coordinated fire to clear paths through the minefield. But this was exactly what General Wells had expected them to do, because it forced them to divide their attention between multiple threats. Jupiter's moons launched the second wave of Earth's defense as massive electromagnetic pulse generators. Hidden beneath the ice of Europa began broadcasting interference that disrupted alien communication networks, while Ganymede's industrial facilities fired clouds of metallic chaff. The Synthesis Collective's ships proved most vulnerable to this electronic warfare because their artificial intelligence systems required constant communication with each other, and soon entire squadrons of collective vessels were flying blind and deaf through space Saturn's rings, provided cover for human attack squadrons that had been waiting and hiding for months, and these ships struck at the flanks of the alien formation, using hit-and-run tactics that Admiral Jackson had learned from studying ancient human cavalry charges. Grand Admiral Zarthul felt his carefully planned assault dissolving into chaos as his three-species alliance struggled to coordinate their response to attacks coming from directions they had not expected, and he began to understand why individual human colonies had defeated much larger alien forces. The red planet Mars revealed its transformation when the polar ice caps opened like giant flowers to expose railgun batteries that could launch projectiles across the solar system with deadly accuracy, and these weapons began picking off alien capital ships with surgical precision. Dr. Murphy's masterpiece became apparent as the alien fleet approached Earth orbit and discovered that the planet's entire technology infrastructure had been synchronized into a single defensive network that responded to threats with creativity that no alien military planner could predict. Orbital elevators became kinetic bombardment systems that could drop tungsten rods on enemy ships with devastating effect, while communication satellites coordinated precision strikes using targeting data collected from sensors throughout the solar system. The International Space Station had been converted into a command and control hub that directed swarms of defensive platforms, each one armed with weapons improvised from civilian technology and operated by crews who treated the battle like a deadly game. Admiral Jackson finally committed his fleet to direct combat when the alien alliance tried to break through Earth's orbital defenses, and the battle that followed would be remembered as the most chaotic engagement in galactic military history. Human ships fought using tactics that violated every principle of space warfare, with cargo haulers ramming alien cruisers while mining. Vessels used their industrial equipment to tear enemy ships apart from the inside. The alien alliance found themselves fighting not just human military forces, but the entire planet Earth itself, as gravity well generators created artificial tidal forces that pulled enemy ships off course, while orbital mirrors focused sunlight into devastating laser beams. General Wells coordinated the defense from Luna Base while watching her tactical displays show a battle that resembled no military engagement in recorded history, with weapons firing from every direction and human forces using equipment that had never been designed for combat. The turning point came on the third day of fighting, when Dr. Murphy activated his ultimate defensive measure, synchronizing every piece of technology on and around Earth into a symphony of destruction that attacked alien ships using principles that seemed to violate known physics. Alien vessels found themselves under attack by their own shadows, as Earth's magnetic field was manipulated to create electromagnetic anomalies, while radio telescopes became weapons that could overload enemy sensors with focused broadcasts. The Vraxian flagship took damage from a garbage disposal satellite that had been converted into a kinetic weapon, while Korthian warriors watched in disbelief as their shields were penetrated by modified weather control systems that created localized space-time distortions. Grand Admiral Zarthul realized his alliance was defeated when he looked at his tactical display and could no longer understand what he was seeing. because human forces were using the laws of physics themselves as weapons in ways that his military education had never covered. The retreat began when collective ships started targeting their own allies because their AI systems could no longer distinguish between friend and foe in the chaos of Earth's defensive network. And soon the greatest military force ever assembled was fleeing in disorder. Admiral Jackson pursued the retreating aliens only as far as Mars' orbit before calling his ships back to Earth. Not because he lacked the strength to continue, but because he wanted the survivors to spread word of what they had witnessed. The final casualty count showed that the alien alliance had lost 70% of their fleet, while Earth's defenders had suffered relatively minor losses. But the real victory was the message this sent to every species in the galaxy about human determination. General Wells ended the siege by broadcasting a simple message to the retreating aliens, thanking them for the combat exercise and inviting them to return anytime they wanted another lesson in creative warfare. Grand Admiral Zarthul's final transmission before entering hyperspace spoke of encountering a species that weaponizes entropy itself, and his words would be quoted in military academies throughout the galaxy for generations to come. The Siege of Terra became the defining moment in human history when a single planet's population proved that creativity and determination could overcome any odds, no matter how impossible victory might seem to others who lacked the vision to see weapons everywhere they looked. Captain Susan Lee stepped off her transport ship onto the floating diplomatic platform, where the Galactic Council held its sessions, accompanied by Ambassador Frank Chen and Colonel Janet Price, and she could feel the eyes of a dozen alien species watching her every move with a mixture of fear and curiosity. The galaxy had changed dramatically in the 6 months since the Siege of Terra, with human ships appearing throughout, known space not as conquerors but as explorers and traders, who seemed genuinely interested in learning about other cultures while also demonstrating their willingness to defend themselves if threatened. Counselor Prime Veltar of the Etherian Republic called the emergency session to order, while representatives from 50 different species took their positions in the great amphitheater, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife as everyone waited to see what humanity would demand. Some species saw humans as monsters who had broken the civilized rules of warfare by using creativity and improvisation to defeat enemies that should have been unstoppable, while others viewed them as potential liberators who might free the galaxy from the dominance of the major military powers. The scholarly Etherian Republic and the nomadic wanderer fleet had already approached humanity seeking alliances and knowledge-sharing agreements, fascinated by the human approach to problem-solving that seemed to find solutions where none should exist. Ambassador Chen stood before the assembled council and delivered a speech that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come, explaining that humanity had no desire to conquer the galaxy, but simply wanted to explore it, trade with it, and learn from the vast diversity of life among the stars. Captain Lee watched the alien faces around the amphitheater as Chen described the human concept of creative destruction, the idea that sometimes old systems must be broken before better ones can be built, and she could see understanding dawning in some eyes while others showed fear. The demonstration that changed everything began when Chen presented solutions to several long-standing galactic problems using approaches that human minds had developed, starting with the Vraxian Empire's resource shortage crisis that had been considered unsolvable for decades. Dr. Kevin Murphy, attending the session via holographic projection from Earth, explained how asteroid mining techniques that humans had developed out of necessity could provide the Vraxians with more raw materials than they could use in 1,000 years, using methods so simple that alien engineers felt embarrassed for not thinking of them. The Synthesis Collective's problem with AI stagnation became the next challenge that humans tackled, with Colonel Price demonstrating how chaos theory and random variables could be introduced into artificial intelligence systems to promote creative thinking, rather than rigid adherence to programmed responses. Even the proud Korthian warriors found themselves interested when Ambassador Chen explained the concept of competitive cooperation, where different groups could maintain their warrior traditions while working together toward common goals instead of constantly fighting each other. Counselor Prime Veltar found himself amazed as he watched human representatives solve problems that had plagued the galaxy for centuries, using nothing more than creative thinking and a willingness to approach challenges from angles that no One else had considered the Terra Accords took 3 days to negotiate as diplomats from dozens of species worked out the details of humanity's integration into the galactic community, with humans agreeing to share their problem-solving techniques in exchange for access to alien knowledge and technology. Admiral Curtis Jackson arrived on the second day of negotiations to address concerns about human military capabilities, explaining that Earth's defense forces existed only to protect human interests and had no desire to impose their will on other species through conquest. The most difficult part of the negotiations involved establishing rules for human military advisors who would train alien forces in adaptive tactics, because many species were afraid that learning human methods might corrupt their own military traditions. Colonel Price assured the Council that humans had no interest in creating copies of themselves throughout the galaxy, but rather wanted to help each species develop their own approaches to creative problem-solving that built on their existing strengths. The Wanderer Fleet's representative spoke eloquently about how human ideas had already helped her people solve navigation problems that had limited their exploration for generations, while the Etherean scholars shared examples of scientific breakthroughs that had resulted from human-inspired research methods. Captain Lee watched the proceedings with satisfaction as she saw former enemies beginning to work together, with Vraxian engineers discussing mining techniques with Korthian warriors while collective AI systems analyzed human chaos theory applications. The signing ceremony took place on the anniversary of first contact between humans and aliens, with representatives from every major galactic power adding their signatures to documents that established humanity as a full member of the galactic community. Ambassador Chen's closing remarks emphasized that humans brought not superior technology or overwhelming military might to the galaxy, but rather a different way of thinking about problems that seemed impossible to solve. The final scene of the negotiations showed Admiral Jackson in a training facility on Luna Base, teaching a mixed group of human and alien officers the principles of adaptive warfare while emphasizing that creativity itself was the most powerful weapon in any arsenal. The Galactic Council chamber erupted in applause when Colonel Price delivered the speech that would be remembered as the defining moment of human integration into galactic society, explaining that humans had succeeded not because they were better fighters than anyone else, but because they refused to accept that any fight was impossible to win. The months following the Terra Accords saw human advisors working throughout the galaxy to help solve problems that ranged from agricultural crises to energy shortages, always using approaches that combined human creativity with alien knowledge and capabilities. Trade agreements flourished as human merchants discovered markets for Earth products while bringing back alien technologies that would revolutionize life throughout the solar system, creating prosperity that benefited every species involved in the new partnerships. The military academies of a dozen worlds began teaching courses in adaptive tactics based on human methods, though instructors always emphasized that the goal was not to copy human approaches, but to develop each species' own capacity for creative thinking. Dr. Murphy found himself appointed as the first director of interspecies scientific cooperation, coordinating research projects that brought together the best minds from multiple worlds to tackle challenges that no single species could solve alone. The transformation of galactic society accelerated as species that had been enemies for centuries began working together on projects inspired by human examples, proving that cooperation could accomplish far more than competition or conquest. Captain Lee's final report to Earth Command described a galaxy where human influence was spreading not through military conquest but through the simple demonstration that any problem could be solved if enough creative minds worked together to find new approaches. The legacy of human integration into galactic society would be measured not in the battles they won or the territory they controlled, but in the countless problems that were solved by species learning to think beyond the limitations they had always accepted. Ambassador Chen concluded his memoirs with the observation that humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy was not any specific technology or military technique, but rather the idea that innovation and adaptation could overcome any challenge, no matter how impossible it might seem to those who lacked the imagination to see new possibilities everywhere they looked.